death of Harold Ramis seemed to put an end to the possibility of a third movie. In all honesty, that was okay by me. How can there be a Ghostbusters 3 without Egon? Ivan Reitman seemed to agree with this, for he no longer wanted to direct another Ghostbuster movie. So this means there won't be any more movies, right? I wish I could say yes, but the answer is no. Sony approved of an all-female reboot of Ghostbusters. The less said about that, the better. Then came the announcement fans thought we'd never get. A third movie to the franchise was being made. Only it wasn't called Ghostbusters 3. It would be called Ghostbusters Afterlife. Although Ivan Reitman would be involved with the production, he wouldn't be the main director. That honor would go to his son, Jason Reitman. Jason had previously played the kid who said, "My dad says you guys are full of crap," in Ghostbusters 2. Since then, he had went on to become an established filmmaker in his own right. In the past, Jason had been reluctant to direct a Ghostbusters film. He was worried about facing accusations of nepotism. Those fears would be put to rest when the fans embraced Jason with open arms. It wasn't hard to see why. Jason always acted humble in interviews. He seemed to care deeply about the franchise. Released in 2021, Ghostbusters Afterlife would make the death of Harold Ramis a focal point of the movie. It had been 30 years since the Ghostbusters had been in business. Each member had gone their separate ways. Peter became a professor, Winston became a successful businessman, and Ray only has his occult bookstore. The only reason why it's still in business is because Winston pays the rent. As for Egon, he dedicated his life to keeping Gozer from coming back. This obsession of his caused a rift between him and Ray. One night, as Egon is trying to capture Zool, his traps failed. This leads to the most painful part of the movie, the death of Egon Spangler. The rest of the movie centers around Egon's daughter Callie, who never met him, grandson Trevor, played by Finn Wolfhard, who previously wore a Ghostbusters outfit on Stranger Things, and granddaughter Phoebe, played by McKenna Grace. The Spanglers are forced to move into Egon's farm in Somerville, Oklahoma, where Phoebe starts to learn about the grandpa she never knew. Fan reaction to Afterlife was overwhelmingly positive, though there were some detractors. I'm going to address some of the most common complaints against the movie. Too much reliance on fan service. The movie is meant to be a love letter to the franchise. Of course there's going to be a ton of fan service. Both the video game and the IDW comics were filled with a ton of fan service. Maybe even more than this movie. This would be a fair criticism if it felt like pandering, but it never does. It felt like there was genuine love for Ghostbusters. To prove my point, Jason Reitman decided against bringing back Slimer because he felt there was no logical reason for him to return. That's a pretty gutsy move to not bring back one of the most iconic ghosts from the franchise. It's a rehash of the first movie. Not really. Yes, it is about the return of Gozer, the Terror Dogs, and there are a few similar story beats, but it does have new ghosts like Muncher and the mini Stay Puffs. It was also nice to see Ivo Shandor return. They even used his design from the video game. I also like how we got to see Gozer uncross the streams. I admit it would have been nice to see a different villain other than Gozer, but it's fine as is. It ignores the events of the second movie. How? The movie does feature the Gaga meter and the mood slime in Egon's lab. If that's too subtle for you, there's Ray's Occult Bookstore. That's the most obvious reference to Ghostbusters 2. There's also the fact that Jason Reitman came out and said the movie's still canon. I do wish there were more references to the movie, but Afterlife never pretends like it never happened. I don't know why many think Ghostbusters 2 is now non-canon. Egon is a deadbeat dad. This is perhaps the most common complaint against the movie. Before the events of the first movie, Egon had Callie. Afterlife makes it clear that Callie never met Egon, but she does know who he is. So, why did the movie do this? Believe it or not, this is a reference to Harold Ramis. You see, Harold had an out-of-wedlock daughter with the director of Fast Times on Ridgemont High. Violet, Harold's daughter from a previous marriage, stated in a book that her father wasn't a part of her sister's early years. Unlike Egon, Harold did get to meet his illegitimate daughter while he was still alive. As for Egon, he has never been an emotional guy. I tend to think that when he had Callie, he agreed with her mom that he shouldn't be a part of her life. Given that Egon would come to have a dangerous life, he most likely thought it was for the best. He was an absent father, but I don't think he was a deadbeat. He did keep track of Callie throughout her life. He had a whole board full of her pictures in his lab, the place where he'd be doing his work. I think it's safe to say he paid child support. Everyone disrespected Egon. The people of Somerville had no idea who he was. To them, he was just a dirt farmer, the crazy man. Callie believed her father didn't love her, and Ray is bitter about Egon taking their equipment and running. None of these things were going to make him popular. As Phoebe learns more about her grandfather, she starts to defend him every chance she gets. At one point, she almost blasted the sheriff of a proton pack for insulting him. I get why fans don't want to hear people trash Egon, but it made the sacrifices he made so much more powerful. He wasn't trying to be popular. He was trying to save the world. That cost Egon everything. His friends, his family, his business, his reputation, and finally, his life. The movie does end with Egon's sacrifices being recognized, and he gets one final moment with his friends and family. Ray's a bitter old man. Let's see. Ray lost his business, one that he mortgaged his house for. He's also seen his co-workers and friends move on with their lives, having successful careers, while Ray just has his occult bookstore that doesn't turn a profit. The only reason why it's still in business is because Winston pays the rent. To top it off, he feels betrayed by one of his closest friends. That would cause anybody to feel bitter. When Ray said his infamous Egon Spengler can rot in hell line, he said it out of anger. The moment he learns that Egon died, Ray looked like he regretted what he said, showing that despite his bitterness, he still cared about Egon. Now, about Ray not believing Egon. A lot of people act like Ray should just believe everything Egon says. The movie does a great job at explaining why Ray wouldn't believe Egon when he said that Gozer is coming back. When Gozer first arrived, business was booming, showing that the dead were rising from the grave. Later, business got so bad they were lucky to get one call a week. Then Egon started to scare away the few customers they got. So you're telling me that Ray is going to believe that Gozer is coming back when his business is dying? I don't think so. I sure wouldn't believe it. Ray simply thought Egon lost his mind from the stress of trying to keep their business afloat. The hostility between Ray and Egon was based on the real-life falling out between Bill Murray and Harold Ramis. I think it would have been too on the nose if they had Peter bitter towards Egon. It was a good idea to choose Ray, since he and Egon were always working together. The original Ghostbusters played minor roles. Let's face it, whenever we think of Ghostbusters, we're always going to think of Peter, Ray, Egon, and Winston. These are the characters we know and love. I'm not going to lie. I would have loved to have seen Peter, Ray, and Winston play bigger roles in this movie. The fact is, Ghostbusters 3 was always going to be about passing the torch, and that's what Afterlife is. I honestly think the new characters are, for the most part, pretty good. Phoebe is the best one. She does a great job at carrying the movie. Podcast was good too. I loved his interactions with both Phoebe and Ray. Trevor was okay. Lucky was just kinda there. Gary was pretty funny, and Kelly was pretty good too. I think the original characters were used just enough. That part where they first arrived was just awesome. Seeing Phoebe bust Gozer with her grandpa and the others was by far the best part of the movie. I was never a fan of the idea of any of the Ghostbusters coming back as a ghost, but this movie pulled it off well. Was Afterlife exactly what I wanted Ghostbusters 3 to be? No. That honor goes to the video game. With that said, Afterlife is the best Ghostbusters 3 movie we could have gotten. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. And don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later.